I hope you were able to have some great discussions with our speakers. We now have a small amount of time actually set aside if there's any thoughts that people would like to share with the entire group, or if anyone has any questions that they weren't able to ask and they want to ask it in this format. So we've got a few minutes set aside for that. If anybody has any questions, please just put your virtual hand up in the thread. I might kick things off actually, because I had one question that I think a few presenters actually sort of touched on, is that disaster resilience education shouldn't just be focused in the response phase. And so I was wondering if any of our presenters had any further thoughts about how disaster resilience education can focus on all the different phases, and if there's potentially a most important phase to focus on.
Yeah, cool. So my thinking around that, I guess, is, we've got quite, like I was talking about the STEM resources where, it's about creating structures that can withstand different things. So there's a lot of long-term planning that can be done. We're looking at the next generation of engineers and architects and scientists and designers. So in terms of disaster resilience education for kids, there's a lot of scope to really go into the creative world, and not just because recovery, it's so important. And I think responding to that disaster in terms of being prepared for your evacuation, it's also essential, but it's all very now. And I think some kids will find that unless they know that this has happened to someone they know, or they've been seeing it on the news, it doesn't feel relevant. It doesn't feel real. It feels like, nothing's going to happen to me that's ever bad. And I certainly still have that attitude. Like, I haven't lived through a flood, and I'm unlikely to live through a flood, but it could always happen. But I never think it's going to happen to me. Same as with, illness and disease. So, but what you can do is you can really get excited about what's out there in terms of architecture and design and creative thinking, and how can we, build a city on stilts to be able to withstand, earthquakes even, so we can all shake about and we can be above the floods, and that everything's made of steel and we won't burn, and think ahead in that way, more long-term and career-wise. Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Janine. I think it's a really good point that, there's a myriad of ways that you can find interesting and exciting ways to get young people involved in disaster resilience education. It isn't just as looking at the response phase of what can you do after a natural hazard has occurred. There's so much you can do before a natural hazard occurred. And the second point that you raised as well, I live here in Melbourne, and there's sometimes that mindset that bushfires, for example, don't affect people living in cities. But it's definitely not the case. Young people in cities need to learn about bushfires as much as those who live in the country. If we look back to the 2019, 2020 fires that happened on the East Coast, the impacts of those impacted the entire country. There was even impacts on the logistics and transport across to WA caused by those fires. So, I think we need to sort of expand our thinking and ensure that all young people are exposed to this form of education.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, that idea of that network and how we're all connected, and how we didn't think about stuff like, well, how do we get groceries to people who are stuck out on the point and the road is gone? It's fascinating. And even just having lived in the city of Melbourne myself, I remember not being able to really go outside because the air quality was so poor. And it's something we're not used to. That it was pre-COVID, so we didn't all have our face masks then, but they would have been ideal and not something we'd considered nor been willing to really wear at that point. So there's just so many interesting and different things that we can think of in terms of how our cities are designed and how our countries are designed and how we get to where. Perfect.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely going to be an interesting next couple of years to see how the current pandemic and other shifts, especially when we look at climate change and how that's going to shift the way young people view natural hazards. So, Elissa, get your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add on to that as well, in regards to especially those fires, and especially the ones that happened around New Year's Eve. There was a lot of families from Melbourne and various other places around the country that were on holidays that were impacted by those fires. And it's so important that we are teaching disaster resilience in all schools, because people will travel. They might have holiday homes, they'll go camping, they'll go somewhere at summer or Easter or whatever it might be, and everybody needs to be aware. And I think that we're in this really sort of important phase right now, where our schools are talking about it. We just need to get it more, I suppose, to become more part of the normal curriculum, that it's just there. Because I mean, I certainly know, I grew up in the Dandenong Ranges, and nothing when I went to school about that. We got evacuated for Ash Wednesday and stuff like that. But right now we're talking about it, and there's so much more involvement with kids discussing their future, and they're part of it with the climate change rallies and so forth, that we really have this opportunity to really, I suppose, take it and run while the topics are there, and just encourage more and more students to get involved, because they will go back to their families and they will then talk about it. So if you've got parents that aren't necessarily educated or aware of their risks, the kids go home and they're excited about it and they talk about it when they get home, that's going to encourage more and more people to be prepared and ready.
Yeah, I guess it's an excellent point you make there, Elissa, especially about young people going home and talking to their families, to their extended families, and especially when you've got maybe recent migrants that have come to the country who aren't aware of it. Sharleen, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Owen. I agree with both Janine and Elissa, and there's a few things we found, particularly when we're looking. So the program we're doing is more that all hazards and can be adapted based on the community, and the learnings that the children and educators took away from this could be transferred so easily to other things. So we had particularly areas in central Queensland that are drought affected. We were talking about drought and moving away and transitions and all that kind of stuff. And they found that they were able to help children with transitions. Coincidentally, a few children were actually moving, not related to the drought, but other things, and were struggling. And the educators and parents hadn't recognised that until we'd started those conversations. So some of this learning can actually apply outside of the context that we're talking about disasters. Similarly because I often take that more mental health perspective with resilience coming from where I'm working. And when we're talking about these coping strategies, they can be applied in so many different contexts. So it supports the children's well-being holistically and their development holistically. And as multiple people have said, that we all are affected in some way or another, and moving around the country, these things that we're learning at school can help us.
Definitely, I completely agree, Sharleen. Wendy, you had your hand up just before.
Yes, I was just thinking about your question of which phase is the most important, and they're definitely equally important. However, if we get that before phase happening correctly, then the others will not be as difficult. And I say that in terms of, most students have a phone now. And when the floods were coming, they were getting text messages, flooding imminent, evacuate immediately. And that's pretty scary to a 13 or a 12-year-old who's got a phone. But when I was a child, my parents were able to filter what was coming from the media, so we were sheltered from that. So we really need to look at students' well-being and their mental resilience to deal with these disasters before, so they don't get into a panic before, and then it helps them work through the during and the after.
Definitely, I completely agree with you, Wendy, and it was interesting from my own personal experience of spending some time in a school last year when the first lockdowns were coming about, and young people were getting these updates. I was going to say daily, but it was sort of an hourly, if not half-hourly basis on their phones, and they had no idea what was going on because they were just overwhelmed with information. So I think it's a really, really important point that you make. But unfortunately, that is about all the time we have for today. So I would like to again thank all of our presenters for speaking with us. It's certainly provided us with a lot to think about. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending. As we look ahead to 2022, the ADA Education for Young People program will be focusing on two key themes: young people's voice and educator professional development. In mid-2022, Ada will be running a youth forum designed to provide young people with the platform to share their experiences. Ada recognises young people as active agents of change, and we want to shine a light on this. Further information will be sent to the DRANZSEN network in early 2022, so if you have not had an opportunity to sign up, I strongly recommend you do. In addition to this, Ada is looking to build on the teachers forum that we've had today and provide further professional development opportunities for teachers and community educators. However, before we do this, we want to hear from you. The last thing we want to do is design a program or resources without asking the simple question of what do teachers need or want. We've produced a survey asking exactly this and providing you with the opportunity to have input on the design of this professional development. A link to the survey can be found in the chat and will be emailed out after today's forum when the recording is made available. We would greatly appreciate any feedback. Finally, as educators, your voice is integral to helping continuously improve and advocate for positive mental health outcomes for children and young people in Australia. Beyond Blue, through the Education Voices program, is looking for leaders, educators, allied health professionals and associated staff within the early childhood, school aged care and pre-service education sectors to help drive the continuous improvement of their BU program. Further information can be found at their website, and I encourage you to visit and find out more. On behalf of Ada, thank you for joining today. We'll send you an email once the recording from today's session is live on our Knowledge Hub. If you're interested in presenting at future DRANZSEN events, or if you work with young people who would be interested in sharing their experiences of disaster resilience education at our 2022 forum, please email me at owen.ziebel@ada.org.au. When you exit today's Zoom session, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. We'll use this information to ensure our professional development events program continues to meet your needs. It's been a pleasure to host this afternoon. Until next time, stay safe, have an enjoyable summer holiday period, and farewell. Thank you.